Hey guys, David Stewart here. Thought I'd talk today about something that's pretty important for anyone who plays one of these things. Flamenco guitar or classical guitar or an acoustic guitar in general. Even someone who plays something like a violin or a viola or a cello. And that is, how do we go about amplifying this thing? And why do we need to amplify it? This is relevant for anyone who plays any sort of instrument where they are having to play for a large crowd, and that's going to be most people today, or people who are having to play in a noisy environment, which is going to be most people who are gigging today. What we have to understand about this particular instrument, or any of our typical stringed instruments, like even clavichord, if we go all the way back to the medieval period, these instruments were developed in a time where there was no amplified music. And as a result, they are, in some cases, quite quiet, at least until you have the cast iron soundboard in a piano. The pianoforte even was fairly quiet. And it's only now that we're really asking this instrument to be something very loud. And we're really demanding that it take its place in modern music and be able to be louder than it is just as an acoustic instrument. And there's a couple reasons why that's important and why we do that now. So this instrument was developed before there was amplification. People before there were amplification had a different relationship with music than they do now. They were used to hearing music be quiet. They also didn't have severely damaged hearing like we have now, so they were able to hear quiet music with greater detail. They were also used to hearing things in acoustic spaces that enhanced the music because you only saw live music. There were no such thing as recordings back in the 19th century and before. So you only saw music in places where people would play music, which are going to be spaces that were designed to be acoustically active and to enhance the acoustics of the instrument. Likewise, audiences behaved differently towards live music. Nowadays, if you go to like a rock concert, you're going to hear a lot of loud noise, cheering, talking, screaming. The music will be louder than any one person can talk, and it's designed to be that way. But if you were to go to a concert hall in the 19th century, people would be absolutely quiet. In fact, this tradition lives on in the classical tradition. If you go to a classical music concert, and I see this all the time now, people come to concerts and they have no idea of concert etiquette, and they talk during a performance or do similar things like that. Audiences came prepared to listen to music and wanting to hear the music, so they didn't talk, they listened intently, their hearing wasn't damaged, and they were in a space that allowed for acoustic music to be active and to be enhanced. The modern performer of the guitar or other stringed instruments, including violin, does not have that luxury. They're playing in large spaces that were not necessarily designed to enhance the acoustics of their instrument, especially an instrument like the guitar, which is actually quite quiet. They're playing in a space that was designed for other purposes. A rock concert often happens at an arena. An arena is a terrible acoustic space. That's a space that's designed to let people see basketball being played, not to hear music. Even if you play in a larger concert hall today, I haven't been in a modern concert hall that I felt like was, no, that's not true, but most modern concert halls, I'll put it this way, most modern concert halls I've been in, I can tell were not designed to facilitate the playing of most acoustic solo instruments like guitar to any great capacity. At best, modern concert halls like Disney Hall, which I've actually played in, are designed to sound good for larger ensembles, and I think it's actually debatable whether they do. I'm actually not a fan of the acoustics in Disney Hall down in Anaheim. Or no, in LA. Sorry, that's in LA, not in Anaheim. I don't know why. Probably Disney, Anaheim. Anyway, it's in LA. And I'm not a big fan of those acoustics. Smaller halls, like some of the halls that I've played in at colleges, really do enhance the guitar and enhance the violin as solo instruments. But they're smaller. They're much smaller. They have a lot more hard spaces. They have a lot more wood paneling. And most of the time, you're not going to be hearing the music in that capacity. You're going to be, especially if you're a performer, you're probably going to be playing outdoors. You're going to be playing in like a restaurant that's noisy. You're going to be playing in a capacity where people are expected to talk around you and are not expected to be listening quietly and intently with good ears to know what you're doing. That also affects repertoire choice, but that's a completely different video. We're just mostly talking about why you're probably going to need to end up amplifying this thing, and that's really why. So you're going to be playing in a restaurant that's loud. You're going to have to provide enough ample background noise for the entire space, which will be a fairly acoustically dead space so that people can hear each other talking across the table. You're going to have to provide enough power for that to for people to be able to hear it and yet it not be intrusive. You're going to be playing in maybe as part of a band. If you're playing as part of a rock band, you're competing with drums, amplified bass, amplified vocals, and you need to amplify as well in order to compete with that and to be part of the mix. And all of those present a unique challenge for an acoustic instrument. And that challenge was probably most concisely and directly met with the, not with this thing, but with this thing, the electric guitar. And I'll talk about that in a second. But the electric guitar is important because it meets all the needs of a guitarist, except it's not acoustic. And if you're a classical guitarist, it doesn't feel right or sound right. So I'll talk about that in a second. So we're wanting to be pretty loud. And there's a couple ways that you can achieve a louder sound with your instrument. All of them have more or less significant drawbacks when you're used to playing an actual acoustic instrument that you can tap on and make noise and has the response of a real acoustic instrument. So the first thing that you can do to amplify your classical guitar is to use a microphone. You're going to hear me on a microphone. I'm trying to do this so it doesn't make too much noise, but there's the mic. Okay, there's a mic. All right. So you're gonna mic the guitar. Now miking the guitar provides the most authentic sort of sound of the acoustic guitar. So it's as close to ideal. Let's start with the ideal. So the ideal is a concert hall with people listening quietly, able to hear all the details of the music fully acoustically. That's like the ideal. A microphone is closer to that ideal because a microphone is listening to the acoustic sound of the instrument. Okay, a microphone's listening to the acoustic sound of the instrument. It's not like working as an electric guitar where it's picking up magnetic fields from the instrument or anything like that. It's picking up purely the sound of the instrument out in front of it or wherever you choose to mic it. There's a couple of big drawbacks from that. The first one is not all miking uses are the same. Your guitar, especially if you're playing classical guitar. Now this is a flamenco guitar, so you may mic it differently because it's a flamenco guitar. But a classical guitar really is going to have its best sound and its most appropriate sound in a good, fairly active space 5 to 10 feet away from the guitar. That's because the high frequencies really fall off very quickly. The very, very high frequencies fall off very quickly once you get kind of far away from the guitar. And what you're left with is sort of the more true tones of the guitar. So people that are out looking for a very like glass-like guitar tone may find that if they were to listen to their guitar tone 10 feet away from them, it would be more appropriate. It would be more pleasing to them. A lot of the higher frequencies tend to get lost as you move further away from the mic. So imagine a concert situation where you wanted the closest to ideal. You're playing for a huge crowd. You put a mic array about 5 or 6 feet away from the guitar, and that's what produces the sound. Now, the drawback to using a mic is that it has a lot of feedback. What feedback is when you have the sound coming out of a speaker and then it's going into the mic and then coming back out the speaker, it creates what's called a feedback loop. And you'll hear it as this really high, loud, shrieking noise that just keeps getting louder and louder as the single frequency becomes amplified over and over and over again through the mic, out the speaker, back into the mic, through the amp, over and over again. So microphones are really prone to that. So if you're going to play in a concert hall with a legitimate mic array with like sensitive condenser mics 6 to 10 feet away from you, those mics would in turn have to be very, very far back from the mains of the PA, whatever speakers you were using to push that sound out to the audience. They'd have to be pretty far back from that. Otherwise, they're going to get a large amount of feedback. And if the speaker's not facing the microphone and especially the pickup pattern of the microphone directly, you're going to get less feedback. So that's probably closest to ideal, but most people are not going to be able to play in that situation. You're going to be closer to the front of the stage. The sound of the mains are going to be a real problem. That means you start putting the mic closer and you start using different mics. Now you start getting to the real way that most people tend to mic their guitars. They tend to use an SM57 or similar instrumental mic, like right here, or I actually like it more over here. I feel like picking up closer to the bridge gives it a little more of the soundboard, a little more rasp, and gives it a little more warm tone, rather than here. There's so much air moving in and out of the sound hole that you're going to get kind of a peaky sound unless you're running it through a compressor. So I really like to not mic it on the sound hole. So microphone, that's one solution you're going to have. The big drawback to the microphone, even if you're using an instrumental mic here, is feedback. It's going to be very prone to feedback unless you're very far away from all the monitors and the mains, which in some cases may not be possible. And when you're doing that, let's say you're playing by yourself, you're not going to be totally sure how loud your mains are without being able to hear them or ask someone to evaluate that. The other drawback to using a microphone is that if you got a microphone right here, you better not move your guitar around, because that mic's going to start slamming into the top of the guitar and you're going to start getting different noises. So if you're someone who really likes to move their guitar around when they play, you're going to find that it's pretty annoying, as I have. And I tend to move around a lot. Especially if I'm playing long gigs, I like to move around a lot, keep my back loose and that sort of stuff. So for me, I don't like mics really at all for that reason. In order for them to get loud enough to really amplify with smaller systems as well, you're going to be very, very prone to feedback. And some systems won't be able to drive a mic enough for you to really get a significantly enhanced loudness to your guitar. For a little bit of sound reinforcement, it's not a bad way to go. It's the way I go for most things when I'm playing flamenco, simply because you just can't duplicate the sound of a flamenco guitar on anything but a microphone. And the big reason for that is, like I played at the beginning, not just the sound of that, but the taps. Those acoustic noises don't really exist. Well, they exist, but they're not as prominent, and they don't sound as good when you use other systems. The next system that you'll see used with a classical or any sort of acoustic guitar is what's called a piezoelectric pickup, or a piezoelectric pickup. You could pronounce it both ways. I've also heard people call it a piezo, but I believe piezo is the correct pronunciation. Please, or piezo, both of those. I believe those are the correct pronunciations, but please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm always happy to be wrong if I'm actually wrong, because that means I learned something. So a piezoelectric pickup, usually it's placed underneath the saddle, underneath the bridge bone of your guitar. And it's a little flat piece of crystal. And what it does is it generates a little bit of electrical current based on the pressure that's being put on it. It's called the piezoelectric effect. And what that does is when you have a vibration, that's putting a bunch of pressure on the little pickup element. In fact, it's going to be putting pressure at exactly the frequency of whatever you're doing here. And in turn, you boost that signal up and you pump it through an amp, and then you end up with a good approximation of what an acoustic guitar sounds like. Now, call it an approximation. It's not the real sound of an acoustic guitar, because that's coming out of the sound hole. But because it's under the saddle, which is where on an acoustic guitar most of the energy is transferred to the soundboard at the saddle. A lot of people think it's at the sound hole. The sound hole is to relieve the pressure from the resonance of this this big column of air inside. Okay, that's to relieve the pressure. If you didn't have the sound hole, you'd have a lot of buffeting, internal buffeting of the sound. That's why you have F holes in a violin. And if you have a violin, you can actually try this. Cover up one of the F holes and hear what a different tone the violin will have. It'll have a very different tone when you cover up one of the F holes. And when you have both F holes open, it has a much more open, kind of broad tone. Just something that you can try out. But that's why we have the holes. And some acoustic guitars will actually have portholes. They'll have extra holes here to allow the air to move more freely as the strings vibrate. But yes, the energy is transferred at the bridge to the top. And you could test this yourself. Play a chord and feel what parts of the guitar are vibrating the most. You can hear as I play this, and hopefully the mic will pick it up. As I touch the top of the guitar, it gets very quiet. Whereas if I cover up the sound hole, you know, I could even, I don't know, put a pack of strings there. I don't know if this will work. No, it's touching. Yeah, too big, it's touching the strings, but anyway, you cover up the sound hole, not as much decreases touching the top of the guitar. When you touch the top of the guitar, it really cuts down on the sound. So the piezo element goes under here, and it approximates the sound of the guitar because this is where all the frequencies are transferred to the top of the guitar. And it is quite a bit brighter usually, especially on a classical, mainly because it gets all of the high frequencies before they resonate away from the guitar and die. So again, when you have that mic a little further out, you're going to get a lot less of the bright pingy tone. And when you're using a piezo, you're going to get a very, very bright pingy tone. But luckily, if you're running through an electronics or if you're running through an electronic system or you're running through a preamp, you can usually dial off the high ends to kind of get rid of that. So that's the most common solutions, are a microphone or a what's very, very popular now are piezo or piezoelectric pickups. Usually you drill a hole in the top of your guitar, you put the pickup here, and then you'll have an output jack on the back. Obviously, I'm not going to be drilling holes into this guitar, so I'm not really willing to do that. Another solution that you can use to get a nice loud acoustic sound is a contact pickup. And I actually have one. This one I haven't tried out yet. But basically, this is a piezoelectric element that rather than having to drill holes in your guitar, it goes on the top of the guitar and will pick up the sounds of the guitar as you play without having to drill holes. And also picks up the soundboard sound rather than just the sound of the bridge. You get a lot more of the mid-range frequencies, which I think are cool. So I'll be doing a demo of this. This just came from Japan. It's I don't even know if it's on the market yet. So they sent this to me. It's pretty cool. It kind of adheres with magnets. So I'll do a demo of that. That's another option. This is still a piezo element. It's just not one that goes on the bridge. So if you ever go to like a worship service, you're going to see a lot of guys plugged in over here. They're using a piezoelectric pickup. Now, the drawback of the piezoelectric pickup is, first of all, it's still very, very, very prone to feedback. You face your acoustic guitar at the monitor, and all of a sudden it's exploding with feedback. It's really, really common. People go through all kinds of trouble using phase modulations and all sorts of weird things to try to buck that feedback, and it just doesn't ever seem to go away. Some people, they take their acoustic guitar, they put a piezo on it, they cover up the sound hole to try to buck the feedback, which buffets the sound and cuts down on the resonance of the guitar. And before you know it, it's like, why are you even playing? You're playing like a hollow body piezoelectric guitar. Okay, so that's the big drawback of a piezo, is that it still has a lot of feedback, and it doesn't really capture the real sound of the guitar. It's an approximation of the sound. When we hear it, because of where it is, it sounds like an acoustic guitar. And actually, I can demo that real quick, just to prove my point. Let me put this guitar down, put it back in its home, its case, because I have an electric guitar with a piezoelectric element in it. So let's go ahead. Here we go. Okay. So this is my Music Man. This is a John Petrucci signature, I think. Now this guy has a pickup switch up here, down here. That's our regular pickups, our magnetic pickups. We flip this guy up. On these saddles, underneath these saddles, is actually 6 different piezo elements. So we get a very nice like approximation of an acoustic guitar sound. It's not perfect. That's just running through like a jazz chorus sound on my Roland amp. So this is a really just an approximation of an acoustic guitar sound. There's no acoustic qualities to this. If I were to roll off the volume, it's quiet. We turn it up. We get a lot closer to an acoustic guitar. So this is an option, actually. If you guys are playing a steel string guitar, you can get an electric guitar and get Graphtec makes a set of these saddles called the Ghost Tech saddles, which you can get. They have 6 individual piezo elements. They're very, very not prone to feedback because you have a solid body guitar. You don't have that column of air resonating inside, and it will approximate an acoustic guitar sound. This is really useful just for playing in a band situation where you might want a little bit of a sound of an acoustic guitar, and you don't want to bother trying to mess with getting an acoustic guitar out. So this guy works pretty well for that. So you can get piezos that don't really feedback that are in a solid body. The other thing that you can do with the piezo is you can have a solid body classical with the piezo. So I did a review of this. Right now the bridge is off because I'm trying to fix the piezo element in this guy. But this guy does not feedback because it has a solid body. It doesn't have a column of air inside that's resonating. And the piezo element is on the bridge. So it gives you a pretty good approximation of what an acoustic guitar sound would be like, but without any of the feedback. So if you're playing in a very, very loud environment, now I guess each solution is according to your environment. And if you're playing in a band situation, eventually you're probably going to want to go with a solid body classical guitar like this, just because you can plug it through a regular amp. It's not going to explode with feedback. You can play as loud as you want with it, and it'll never. It's very difficult to get it to feedback. The last solution is really a magnetic pickup solution, which is, I'll go back to my electric guitar. Sometimes you'll see acoustic guitars with like a magnetic pickup over the sound hole. And a magnetic pickup is a magnet like a microphone, but it works slightly differently than a microphone. Rather than picking up the acoustic vibration of the strings, when the strings vibrate, they interact with the magnet by creating a magnetic field, and that's what generates the little bit of electrical current that creates the sound of the guitar. It's not purely the acoustics. Like, otherwise, you could yell into the pickup and it would amplify. So that's not the case. It's actually reacting to the strings. The strings reaction with the magnets creates a magnetic field, which then generates the current. So that's actually really, really cool. With magnetic pickups, you can get a whole bunch of different tones. None of them are really acoustic guitar tones, though, and so that's why a lot of people think of the electric guitar as something different than all the other regular acoustic varieties of guitars, because these magnetic pickups, they sound cool, but they don't sound like an acoustic guitar, and they never really will because they don't work the same way. So that's the last solution, I suppose. And depending on what your goals are, I could recommend different levels of these, right? You could probably run an electric guitar through like an acoustic guitar sim and get a kind of decent sound. You could probably run a solid body steel string or solid body classical guitar to get that sound without the feedback. But of course, once you have a solid body, the trade-off there is that you don't get any of the acoustic sounds that you're normally used to. So on a solid body guitar, you're not going to pick up any of the taps, the slaps, the tambura sounds. You're not going to get any of that. So it's all a matter of trade-offs. My quest, I suppose, as I think about this, and I continue to search for this, is a guitar that will do what my flamenco guitar does, but be able to do it in a really loud environment. So that's really the quest. That's like the ultimate goal, for me at least, is I want to not just get this loud by myself, but I also want to do it in a band setting. I want this instrument to be able to play in a loud environment and produce all the things that I do with it, all the slaps and pops. Now, there's always going to be trade-offs. There are no solutions. So looking for amplified solutions is a matter of deciding which trade-offs you want. With a microphone, you're going to pick up almost all of it. With the piezo, you're going to pick up a lot of it. With a magnetic pickup, you can pick up none of it. With a solid body, you're going to pick up none of the extra stuff that you will still get a lot of the regular tone. So I'm always looking into solutions for that. This one I showed you, this little contact pickup, I'm going to be trying that out with this guitar and some others just to kind of see how it works and if it could be a good amplified solution and sort of how loud the environment could be with it. My guess is it's still not going to be great for a really loud environment, but it'll probably be pretty decent for most gigs, and that's really what I'm looking into. So I know this is a kind of a long rambling video, but if you know of any good solutions for amplified classical or flamenco guitar, I would love to hear them. I'm always happy to hear about what companies are doing it really well and what companies may be doing it really poorly. I've played a lot of different guitars with a lot of different piezo elements in them, and a lot of times I don't really like the sound of a piezo on the guitar. It just sounds very tinny and not natural, but it also lets you be able to play amplified without bumping into a mic and dealing with all that kind of stuff. So it's all trade-offs, and hopefully you'll be able to find your own trade-offs. I'll of course advise on what really good trade-offs I find, what really good sort of systems that I find are working for different styles of music. I will try to let you know. And I appreciate you watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Visit my websites, dvspress.com, davidvstewart.com. Find me on Facebook, facebook.com/davidvandykestewart, and let me know what you want to see and what you want to hear. I hope this has been informative. I know it's a little bit rambly, but it's pretty important to think about trying to take this old school instrument kind of into the 21st century and let it compete with the loudness that people are used to, because I don't want the tone of this instrument to vanish from the earth, and I think it's useful. I don't want to say that it's useless to pursue acoustic instruments in other contexts as well. So thank you so much for watching, and have a great day or evening or morning or whenever you're watching this. I really appreciate you watching.